Well, hey everybody, in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at this very interesting case. It's a bit banged up, as you can see, and there's something very peculiar about it that I haven't seen before. So we're going to go ahead and open this thing up and take a look at it, see what is so interesting, and maybe I can get some feedback from you about this case. So all that is coming up right now on Retro Hack Shack After Hours. All right, everybody, welcome back to Retro Hack Shack After Hours. And as you know, on this channel, I do my E-Waste Wednesday series, and this is another one of those. And it's about this case, which I will tell you how much I paid, if I don't forget, at the end of the video. But as you can see, this case is not put together. It's not neat and clean. I mean, it's in somewhat good shape, I guess, but you can see that the case is actually a little bit apart here. There is a 3.5-inch drive behind here, and there's a 5.25-inch drive behind here. There's this hole here, which I assume there's I can feel it back there, a 7-segment display, generic computer sticker, power button, turbo button, reset button, and a key that will lock the case so that it cannot be opened. I've already, because it's open a little bit, I can tell you the inside is in sad shape, and we'll get to that in just a minute, but I'm guessing, without having opened this up fully yet, that this is most likely a 486 machine. I say 486 because it has an Intel Inside sticker on it, and I know Intel started using this Intel Inside moniker and marketing campaign in 1991. So that would have been before Pentium class machines. I mean, it could have been, this could be a 386 machine. I don't know, but I think they started using Intel Inside with the 486, could be wrong. Definitely when they came out with Pentiums, at some point they started adding Pentium Inside or Pentium down here at the bottom of this. So because this doesn't have Pentium on it, I'm pretty sure that this is either a 386 or most likely a 486 system. And there is some damage here to the front of the case. At least one of the standoffs here has come off. Should be able to fix that no problem, but it's definitely been banged around a little bit. So this is a baby AT case in terms of size. It's got two 5.25-inch drive bays and one 3.5-inch drive bay. But the thing that caught my eye initially was that these are not in the orientation that I usually expect them. Usually I expect 3.5-inch to be here, which it is, but I expect the 5.25-inch to be up here and then all the buttons and stuff to be below. And in this case, it looks like it's reversed or flipped somehow, and the drive bays are on the bottom, for the 5.25-inch, that is. So that was very interesting. And then when I went to look inside of this thing, you would expect there to be the motherboard back here and open space here so that you can reach the motherboard and get to the memory and the hard drives and all that kind of stuff. But actually, when you take this thing off, you'll see it is exactly the reverse. So we have the motherboard mounted this way, and everything on this thing is flipped around. And that's why those drive bays have to be at the bottom, or that's the logical place for them anyway, is because this whole thing is mirrored. It seems like it should be the motherboard mounted on the back with the power supply back here. And in fact, the power supply is actually completely flip-flopped. It's on the bottom down here. It's like it's been rotated 180 degrees. Here we go. So now you can see drives, the 5.25-inch drive bays down here, 3.5 here. The power supply isn't even connected, so I'm not sure if that's still working. And this thing has really been banged around. And if we look at these cards down in here, I mean, this video card is literally flopping around in the breeze. It got knocked out or something bad happened to it here. And it looks like there's another IO card in there, which is still in place. Might be hard to see in the shadow there. It looks like what we have right here is a 486SX. So low performance, relatively speaking. There were better ones, but this is one of the chips that was embedded right onto the motherboard. So this would be like a kind of like a value addition for someone to buy back in these days, right? They would have been putting these chips also in laptops and things like that. And it looks like there is a spot for a math coprocessor there as well. It'll be interesting to see if this processors or any of this really is actually working when it's in this condition. Now, I know that today, depending on your desk configuration, if you're building a modern gaming PC that has LEDs and things like that in it, that you can actually buy a left-handed case. So you put everything in left-handed, so to speak, so that if you were to put your PC, let's say, on the end of your desk and it had to face, as you were sitting there, I guess it would face to your right. Maybe that's the only way the PC could face out. If you had a right-handed or a normal case, when you put your PC in there, the lights and stuff would shine towards the desk. It wouldn't shine out where people could see it because you want to show off your gaming rig, right? And you can buy left-handed PCs. They will show the other way so that, if you're in that type of situation where you've got the wall on one side and only one way to show your PC off, you can actually build your PC and get it so people can see it. I don't know, just take this PC as an example. It's got a metal case all the way around it. There's nothing to show off. So in this case, that's not the driving factor of why this case is built 180 degrees turned around. So this is where I need your help. I've seen a couple more examples of this online and in videos and things, but I don't know how common these cases were. Did any of you have one of these cases? Why did you get it? How was it sold? So far I haven't been able to find any ads or anything saying, hey, this is a brand new way to do cases. Everything is turned 180 degrees and it works better for some reason. I haven't seen any of that. So if you know why these cases exist and could fill me in, I would really appreciate it. You guys are always great at giving nice, helpful tips to me. I really do appreciate you commenting down below, and I'll be looking forward to your comments. But in any case, I've never seen one like this. Well, I've got the cards out. This bracket here actually screws in to the back, and this was actually, all the screws were taken off of this as well as the power supply, and this just basically fell out as I was taking the cards off. So it looks like what happened at some point is somebody hit this bracket or unplugged it and did something with it, and then by moving the whole bracket with the cards still screwed into it, that's what ended up unplugging the cards from the motherboard. But it does look like somebody has labeled this nicely. Somebody was taking care of this at some point. All right, well, before I go testing this, we can at least take a look at the video card itself. I have gone ahead and tightened up this bracket, which was the thing that was making this dangle so bad inside the case. So that's tightened back up now. It's an interesting video card, kind of bog standard. Nothing really special about it, I don't think. There's a vertex down here in the corner. It's got 4 memory chips, and it looks like this was at a time when they were planning to be able to use either regular PDIP memory or this other, I forget what that layout is of those footprints there, but they're closer together. They kind of bend underneath as a surface mount option, I think. Yep, surface mount there. So that was kind of in between those, the time of using those two technologies, gave them some flexibility on where they sourced their memory and what type of memory they could get and put on here. But we have a Cirrus Logic chip, excuse me. And then up here, you'll have to forgive me. I just came from the eye doctor. I can't read too well, so I'll catch this in post. But it says something up here about something VGA adapter. I can see my vision is slowly returning back to normal here after being dilated. But yeah, so nothing too special, but a decent standard video card for the day. The other card I'm not going to take out just yet. There's no reason to. The underside is in very good shape, but it's a multi-IO card. So it's got 2 ports of IO down here on the lower portion here. It's got one parallel, one serial port. There's a game, another serial. I may have that backwards. Yeah, this one's another serial. This one's the game over here. And then we've got a floppy controller and an IDE controller, and you have all sorts of settings where you can probably enable, disable, the controllers if you want to, and set all sorts of other things. So these are actually nice ISA cards to have because they do offer a lot of options if you wanted to. For example, add a secondary IDE controller or add a secondary floppy controller. You can change the IRQs and things like that. So really nice cards to have, but I'm not going to take this out just yet and get all of this stuff disconnected. I just want to see if the power supply is working and if the motherboard's working first. Also, with the power supply pulled out of the way, you can see we have a full complement. It looks like 8 slots for memory, 32-pin memory modules in here. So there is a full complement of them. I'm just going to do a quick check on those to make sure that they weren't damaged or have fallen out. Looks like this last one might have popped out, but the other ones, as far as my eyes can tell at this moment, look like they're in good shape. So on to testing the power supply. First thing I'm going to do is just a quick test for shorts on the power supply itself. So we'll look between the 5-volt rail and ground. Oh, I'm on voltage testing. I got ahead of myself here. Okay, 5 volts and ground. Yeah, there's some resistance there and it's growing. So capacitors are charging there. Let's go ahead and check the 12-volt rail. Same thing, charging up that capacitor. So this looks pretty good. You can check the power good, but I would assume that would be fine. Yeah. We can check the -5. Is that the blue or is that -12? I always get them confused. But yep, those are going up. So last but not least, we'll check the white cable between that and ground, and that should give us similar results. There it is. It's changing. Not a dead short. That's in the mega ohm range. So yeah, so I think this power supply is definitely not shorted. I'm going to leave it connected to some of the drives over here just to draw a load. But let's go ahead and plug this in and test the voltages out. There we go. We're getting power and we're getting the fan. So interestingly, I can see the 7-segment display over here is set to 08. So I would think this would be like a 25 megahertz CPU, but could it be an 8 megahertz? No, it couldn't be an 8 megahertz CPU. Maybe that's tied to the turbo button. The 5-volt rail, 5.16, exactly what I would expect. Here's the -12, is that what that is? No, that's the -5, and it did come up very quickly. I saw it, -5. Let's go ahead and check the 12-volt rail. 12.3, really nice. Here's the -12. That's down to -7, but without a load on the -12, that might be okay. And let's just test the power good, which also should be 5 volts. Usually, yeah, 5.1 volts. Usually that power good is going to be good if all the other rails are good. If one of them was bad, then yeah, or if there was a short somewhere, that power good might be off. This power supply seems to be working, so get it hooked back up to the system and see if it boots up. While we're waiting to see if this little baby PC is going to work, I want to thank the sponsor of this episode, PCBWay. PCBWay offers low-cost, high-quality PCB manufacturing and a whole lot more. They offer flexible and rigid-flexible PCBs. They offer surface mount assembly. They offer high-density PCBs with up to 60 layers. They offer aluminum PCBs, and they also offer custom metal and plastic parts that need to be CNC milled or 3D printed. So check out PCBWay for all your PCB manufacturing needs, and I thank them for their support of the Retro Hack Shack. All right, well, here's the moment of truth. I still don't have the I/O card connected yet, but I do have the video card connected and the motherboard's connected to power, so we should at least get something on the screen if everything is working. So here we go. Let's see what happens. Ah, it's changed to 25 now. Oh, no, it went back to 08. Interesting. It was 25, which is what I was expecting. Look. Yes, I wasn't even paying attention. We are booting up 8 megs of RAM. CMOS battery is low. All this stuff is wrong because the battery is dead. But let's just go ahead and hit F1. Here we go. Nice. AMI BIOS. And we could go into standard CMOS settings and set everything up. But now that we know that the motherboard is working and the memory is working, basically the computer is just working. Let's go ahead and plug in this I/O card and see if we can get the thing to boot into DOS. All right, well, unfortunately, I took a look at this board and the only thing I see is a chip down in here. I'll get closer to that in a minute. This appears to be what is essentially a Dallas chip. It's not the Dallas branded one. I forget what the TH stands for on here. It's a different brand, but it's basically, I believe, the same pinout even as the old Dallas chips. So that's a problem. I mean, I've shown on the channel before where you can go in and you can actually use a Dremel tool and you can hook up a new battery to those and get them working again. I could do that here, but this board also I noticed has some pin headers on here. So I went to the retro web and did some searching there, and the closest thing that I can find to this particular board, which is a baby AT board, is a board that's made from a company called Fakebit. They were pretty popular, Taiwanese company, I believe, back in the day. Or when I say pretty popular, I mean pretty common to find these boards in this vintage machine. It's the only one I can find that matches the layout of the slots and everything like that, and it doesn't quite match the layout of the processor and the coprocessor, but it's close enough. Everything else actually lays out perfectly. And so I found out that this, what I believe, this 4-pin header down here is actually an external battery header. So what I'm going to do now is take a look and see if I can figure out which orientation that header is. And then I went ahead and made up a little battery with 2 coin cell batteries here and connected those to this little header here. And I know that the red one is the positive side, and I put a little black mark on this for negative side. So with that, I should be able to hook this up, and because of the orientation of the board, it's right close to these slots, I should just be able to mount this externally, and then it'll make it a lot easier for me to flip this little switch, turn the battery on and off if I ever want to use this. Or if I sell this, I'll probably put this on my eBay store after I'm done fixing it, and then whoever buys it will have a good battery to use, and they won't have to mess with that Dallas clock, if this works. I've had machines like this before where I've hooked up the external battery and there was either a jumper that you needed to cut or something. It just wasn't working with the external battery. So I'm hoping this works. All right, I'm zoomed in with the camera here as far as I can go. Hopefully you can see there's a 3-pin header up here, which if I look at this, it looks like that's to clear the CMOS memory, and then this 4-pin down here. And you only need a positive and a negative on this 4-pin. The way that these typically work is one side will be positive and the other side will be ground. And the way you can tell, if you can see pin 1, that's usually positive, I believe, assuming it's using the standard pinout, which I don't know that it is. And then on the other side, the middle pin, pin 2 would be not connected. Pin 3 and 4 would both be tied to ground. So the way that I can tell the orientation on this, if it's hooked up in a standard way, is I can figure out which 2 pins are connected together. Those should be connected to ground. And then the one on the other side that's not connected to the one next to it is going to be the positive side. I hope that makes sense. But let's just go ahead and, yep, that's working. So I'm just going to go in here and touch that first pin, touch the second pin. I don't get anything. And then I'm going to touch the third pin here and the fourth pin. Yep. Yep. So the third and the fourth pin are both connected together, which means those are most likely the negative side of this 4-pin connector. So if I feed this through the back like that, and then I should be able to connect it like that. And now, assuming this is actually on, I guess I should test this and make sure that it's on. Oh no, it's labeled on and off. That's cool. Okay, so I'll turn this on. And now we should be getting external battery power to the those external battery connections, and hopefully that will feed the Dallas chip and make this thing work. And by the way, those 2 batteries together are about 6 volts, and that should be totally fine for this machine. I think it expects at least like 4.5 volts or a little bit better. I don't think a little bit of overvoltage will hurt that chip in any way. Okay, so before I put all this back together and do more testing, I just want to fire this up and see if indeed that battery is actually holding these CMOS settings. So turn this back on. It doesn't really matter what we change here, but let's just go ahead and change the date, whatever. Now it's set for 1994, fine. Let's just go ahead and save it. It still says CMOS battery state low, but did it remember the setting? Let's just go ahead and go into CMOS. Yes, it still remembers the settings. Somehow it's detecting that the battery state in the CMOS is bad, but I think it's using that external battery okay. Let me just do a full hard reset of this thing and see if it still remembers the date. Yes, it does. So it's actually remembering the settings, but we're just getting that CMOS error beep when it comes up. So maybe there's a way to turn that off, but it does seem to be keeping the settings now. So that's good. Well, as I'm taking this apart and cleaning it, I'm finding more and more things that are suspect about this thing. And I really am glad I'm taking it apart and fixing it now because, for example, on the back here, I found when I took the power supply out, I found that there's a power connector here, which I'm assuming is from the hard drive, hopefully not from the 5¼ inch floppy drive. But yeah, that plug was just ripped off, and these exposed 5 volt and 12 volt, well, I guess 12 volts not there, but 5 volts just flapping around in the breeze, which could short out against the case. So there's that. And then the other thing I noticed in here when I was trying to get the 5¼ inch floppy drive out is it's at an angle. These 5¼ inch drives, just like the CD-ROM drives, if you remember, they had holes on them that were either, upper, like towards the bottom of the drive, or towards the top of the drive, depending on how you're looking at it. But there was either 2 holes up here or 2 holes down here. Well, this particular case uses these rails to insert the drives into this holder here, into this frame. And the rails are attached to the upper part on this side of the drive. But then if we turn this around, you might be able to see it's at an angle because the rails over on this side, well, the whole thing's at an angle because I'm on top of something, but the rails over on this side are on the other one. So it's on the top of this one and on the bottom of this one. And that's putting the whole thing at an angle. And I'm having a really hard time getting this thing out of here because it's just getting bound up as I try to pull this thing out. So yeah, there's just all kinds of things that have gone wrong with this thing. This thing has seen better days in its lifetime. All right, here's the 5¼ inch drive, and it is just nasty. There's like a blanket of dust in here. So all of this is going to get blown out with some compressed air. All right, well, I've got everything cleaned up really well. I think this PC is going to be able to be restored very nicely. Everything's looking great. I've got the drive now, so it's actually in the right rails. Had to go down to the hardware store and get some of the right screws, because even the screws were wrong, which is another reason it was stuck in here, besides the rails being put on wrong. But anyway, everything's mounted back up. Everything's clean. Everything's looking great. However, one thing that I found was that my battery mod that I thought was working, it looks like it is not working. Not the battery mod, but just putting on the external battery. So then I was thinking, well, it's definitely saving the date, and maybe there's a setting in here that I can go in and adjust to turn off that F1, like stop on F1 every time there's an error. And in fact, there's one right here, wait for F1 on any error, and that's enabled. If I disable that and then reboot the computer, in fact, what I found out was if I change any setting in here, because the other thing I did, oh, and now it doesn't have the date. I must have turned off the clock. But it would remember the date. That was no problem. But anytime I changed either of any of those advanced settings or any of the floppy drive settings or any other settings beyond the date, when I rebooted, it would not remember them. It would always remember the date, but it would never remember any of the other settings in CMOS. So I guess we're back to the same old problem where that Dallas chip, that Dallas clock chip in there and CMOS chip probably doesn't have the battery terminals that are inside of the CMOS connected to the external battery. So there's still, even though it has an external battery connector, it doesn't really do you any good because it doesn't connect to that battery. Now, I think there were other of those ICs, the Dallas ICs, that had the battery terminals connected through to the board. But I'll show you in a second, because I'm going to mod one of these now, that the terminal where the batteries are underneath the hood, underneath the socket, underneath the cover of the IC are not connected to the board. So there's no way to charge that Dallas chip externally without dremeling into it in this case. So unfortunately, that means I've got to take everything that I just spent hours putting together, take it all back apart, take the motherboard out, and work on that Dallas chip and get it all put back together. And hopefully we'll be at the point where we can actually set up everything correctly and make sure all the floppy drives and everything else, like the memory, do a memory test and make sure it's all working. Oh, and I forgot to mention, after I blew out the power supply stopped making so much noise. So maybe, just exercising those ball bearings in the fan or whatever now, it is running nice and quiet. It probably won't stay that way forever, but I'm not going to break the whole case of the power supply open and reinstall the fan, because right now it's working pretty well and pretty quietly. All right, and just like that, we have one Dallas chip modified. The original chip, which was this TH6887A, I don't know if these were manufactured differently, but when I cut into them to try to expose the pins, which are on the inside of the Dallas chips, either I could not find them or I went too far. I can actually see in the casing the battery behind there, so I definitely went way too far on this particular one. So I just went and grabbed one of my old Dallas chips. I saved these dead ones in case I don't have any, right now I don't have any new ones on hand. That's what it looks like. You just expose pins 16 and pins 20. 16 is negative, 20 is positive. With a Dremel tool, you just kind of etch that away very carefully until you can see some metal that you can solder onto, and then attach a battery. And these, I really like these actually, these battery holders, battery things. They do have a switch on them, which is nice. And they take either one battery or two. It has a spring that's wide enough that you can stick one battery in there and it'll work, or you can get two in there and it'll give you double the voltage. So yeah, pretty cool. Right now I've got one battery in there because the battery, when you connect directly to the Dallas chip, you need 3 volts and not 6 volts. So that's what I did. I've got one battery in here and I'm ready to put this in the board and see if it works. I desoldered that chip that was in here from the board and put in a socket. So now we can put that chip in and there's plenty of clearance and everything for that. I couldn't do the method where you put the battery holder right on top of the Dallas chip here, because if I did that one of those 2032 battery holders were pretty wide, and it would either block this slot here, this ISA slot, or it would block this memory slot, one way or the other. So yeah, I wasn't able to use the little ones that you would normally insert on the board here on top of the Dallas chip. That's why I use the wires. It works just as well. All right, well, I got everything back together and I went ahead and put a little Velcro on this battery here so that whoever ends up owning this thing can easily access it if they want to. Just take the case off a little bit and you can turn the battery on or off. That'll save the battery from going down or make it easy to change in the future. All right, let's see if we get the battery error. Didn't get a battery error. We just got the options not set and display type mismatch. So let's go ahead and try to set the date and some options. 1984 was a good year. And then we will do the floppy drive. The way I set this up was I had floppy drive A as the 3.5-inch drive and floppy drive B as the 5.25-inch drive. Everything else looks fine. So let's go ahead and exit. Write to CMOS and exit. Yes, let's see if it saves the changes. Now we've got a memory error, CMOS memory size mismatch. So let's go ahead and see what's going on there. But we're not getting the battery error. So let's see if it remembered all of the things I just did. Yes, it does. Now it remembers. Yay! So, okay, so the memory, fine. There's an issue with the memory, no problem. Maybe one of the sims is bad. I don't know, but whatever. Like, at least we're getting this far and saving the settings. So let me work on this a little bit and we'll see if I need to do something with the memory. Hey, look, there we go. So now we're getting to the screen where it's trying to boot something. So we can finally go ahead and test the floppy drives. Yay! First things first, just give this a little clean because it was so dusty. Okay, and now let's put a DOS 6.22 disk in and see what happens. Certainly sounds okay. I think it's going to work. Okay, it is working. It's just going super slow. Maybe that's something in this BIOS that does this. I don't know, but it is working for sure. Okay, so yeah, we're in DOS. And we're reading files, or at least a DIR is working, so that appears to be working. Let's see if this B drive is working. Now, while I had this apart, I did go ahead and clean the heads manually, not with a disk, but with some IPA and stuff, so that should be okay. Let's go ahead and go to the B drive and see. Got a light, and it's working. Make sure we can read the disk. Yep, check it's there. Let's go ahead and run check it, and then we can test the rest of the system. All right, we're in to check it. This floppy drive does have a little bit of noise in the motor, so maybe it'll work itself out over time as things kind of loosen up. Maybe it just hasn't been used in a while, but I am noticing it's working, but it's just got a little bit of a high-pitched noise, so hopefully that will loosen itself up. But we can take a look at the configuration, and there we go, 486, 8 megs of RAM, no EMS driver installed, I know, VGA, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, everything looks fine there. So let's go ahead and do a video test just to make sure that's working. I'm sure it is because we're this far. Okay, this one seems to be working okay. We'll just go ahead and go through these video modes real quick. Okay, all the video modes work. Let's see if we can do a memory test real quick, just to make sure that all that memory is working. All right, the memory test is done. I just did the basic memory test and all of the memory passed, no problem. So looks like everything is working. The video, the memory, the disk drives. It's a little slow, but other than that, everything's working just fine. And I did confirm that the turbo switch is working as well, and that's why this was changing from 25 to 8. So instead for 25 megahertz, because this is a 25 megahertz 486, and if we do just DIR on the A drive, right, it's going to come back bloop, and it's done, right? But if I go ahead and hit the turbo switch and put it back into 8 megahertz mode, and we do DIR, you can see it lists. It takes longer. It takes quite a bit, a noticeable amount longer. It's not crazy long. Let's do that again. See? In the 8 megahertz mode, boop, like that. And then in 25 megahertz mode, it's more like boop, done. So yeah, the turbo switch is working as well. So if you wanted to play some old games on here that were set to the clock speed and would run too fast perhaps at 25 megahertz, you could lower them down to 8 and you'd be good to go. And I love the fact that the 7-segment display is actually set up properly to reflect which mode you're in, so you know how fast you're actually running. Okay, now the last thing I want to tackle as I put this all back together is the case itself. It looks like someone had been prying in here with a screwdriver. There's like some raised areas here. It looks like they tried to pry the front cover off, unfortunately. And also this plastic is a little bit brittle because if we look inside, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, but you can, like back in the corner back there, the posts have broken off. All right, well, I have gone ahead and epoxied all of the posts that were either cracked or were cracking where all of the screws are inside of this thing. And I just used a little bit of the 5-minute epoxy, and I see I forgot to put the lids back on, so hopefully that stuff is still liquid enough. I can just put those back on later. But I went ahead and mixed this up, and I did all 4 of these, and then I had to repair the plastic here. I found another plastic post, put it here in the middle, and went ahead and really just coated the whole thing all around to kind of recombine it into one post. And I did that even while I had the screw already screwed into part of the plastic, one part of the plastic that wasn't cracked, and then I had the other part on the bottom. So just reinforced that whole thing. Now, this has been sitting here actually for a couple of hours, and I can tell it's not fully cured yet. It'll probably be fully cured tomorrow. This stuff's a little bit old, so it will fully harden, but it's not quite there yet. But I think it's good enough. I can go ahead and set this thing up and just see if things are at least holding together good enough that we could tomorrow come back and put this case back together. So you can see I taped up along here just to keep everything together because it was pretty loosey-goosey. And so I just needed to hold everything in place so I could get that epoxy on. I'll just go ahead and take the tape off of all. And I also put the epoxy on in such a way that it wouldn't run in the seams. I really tried to avoid having this run anywhere near the seams because I don't want to epoxy this front on permanently, although there probably wouldn't be any problem with that either. There's no reason why you should necessarily have to take this thing off under normal circumstances. Okay, tape is removed, and before I did this, it was really, you could just take it and pull it apart, and I'm just going to pull on it a little bit. I'm moving the whole case. Yeah, I don't want to pull too hard, like I said, because I want to let this really get set, but that's not moving around at all. I'm moving the whole metal case here just by moving this front piece of plastic. So there's no, yeah, that still slides. I was kind of worried about that too, getting epoxy in there, but that still slides. No movement at all on this. While we're waiting for that to dry, look what just came in. That's my next sign that I'm going to be putting down there in the corner, right there, right down there. So I've got these signs that I've been putting in the garage door here to, I don't know, just kind of make the whole back of the set just look a little bit better. And my latest one is right here. So let me get this open and we'll get it installed and see how it looks. All right, well, here it is. It's an Apple II sign, and it's supposed to be closely resemble the badge on an Apple IIe. And this color, which probably looks black, because it looks black to me even in this room. This is not supposed to be black, by the way. This is supposed to be a medium brown. And I don't think I'm going to send this back, but the color is definitely off. I've yet to figure out exactly how the color works and to what degree I should make the color on as I'm doing these on the screen to adjust for the way the color is going to come out when they do it on the board. So I don't know exactly what's going on, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. You can see I'm getting better with my layout on these when I'm doing them. I actually have exactly where I need to cut this time all the way around, and I'll do that with my knife. And then I can get this, hopefully it should be exactly the right size to go in the opening down there. So I'm going to get this cut out and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm just not happy with this background color. It really should be brown and it ended up being almost black. So that is too bad. All right, and there we have it. So now there is something down in the corner there that'll be in the background. I just wish that brown color came out better. It's not the end of the world, but man, I really wish that brown color had shown up better, because it makes it hard to see the Apple II now, I think. But hey, at least it's something new and something interesting, so that when I'm working on something right here on the desk, now you'll be able to see at least something familiar, somewhat familiar over there on the side. If you have a suggestion for another panel for me to put in there, go ahead and leave it in the comments. I'll take a look at those suggestions, and maybe one of your suggestions will end up on the garage wall. And thanks to everyone who has already suggested in the past. I really appreciate it. All right, well, it has been a day, and the epoxy is now set up and it's nice and strong, and seems like it's going to keep the front of that case on. However, the next problem is that it appears someone has bent these little brackets. These brackets are what you use to screw the case onto the chassis, and it looks like they're all bent in. You can see this one is bent down like this, and it should be bent back very close to the case. There should be a little gap right there, because the outer part of the chassis is going to kind of sandwich between the metal here and the bracket. I did try to put this on once already, and I was like, why isn't this going on? And it's because the bracket up here is actually hitting the top of the video card because it's bent down so much. So yeah, so what I'm going to do here, just so I don't mess up the paint on the outside or try to minimize that risk, is I'm just going to take some of this blue painter's tape that I keep around. I'm going to put that on the outside of the case here to protect the paint on the outside, and then I'll just use a pair of pliers and try to bend that back in. There we go. It's almost there. I'm not exactly sure how much I'm going to have to bend it back in. So what I'm doing is I'm just bending it until this bracket looks like it's perpendicular with the side of the case. So that looks about right. I'll go ahead and do the other ones. See if I can get this thing to actually fit back on the PC. Well, I do have everything back together. It went on okay. It's a little bit of a pain because, you know, I think the case or rather the chassis inside the case, has been bent a little bit over the years. Nothing major, but just kind of tweaked and twerked as people were prying on it and all of that. So it goes on a little rough around the drives here, but nothing crazy. It just takes a little bit of finagling to get it on, and it doesn't go on quite as far as I would like it to go. I'd like it to go about another 1/8 of an inch to really bring these drives out flush, but it's close. The other problem I had when I was putting this together was the 7-segment display here for the speed. I didn't have the right standoffs. The standoffs that they used, whoever put this together, were the wrong size. The 7-segment display itself was recessed a good, maybe more than 1/4 of an inch, almost 1/2 an inch, and you really couldn't read the numbers. Maybe there was a little piece of glass or plastic that went on here at some point. It came off. So I did the best I could with the standoffs I had. Brought it quite a bit closer, so it looks pretty much normal at this point, except in the process, I also lost a segment. So I'm going to have to go back in and figure out what I did there. I must have got a jumper in the wrong position or something, so I need to go fix that. So I am going to have to take it apart, put it back together one more time. Other than that, it is back together, whole again. This thing was not even able to be put on. When I picked it up, it was all kind of falling apart, and I just kind of picked it up in my hands and put it in the car. And now it's back in not only working condition, everything structurally is now sound. The front of the case isn't coming off anymore. Still have to be a little careful of that, but it's in there pretty well. And it looks great. The power switch is working. Turbo switch is working, as we saw before, as soon as I fixed that little segment of the display there. And yeah, now it's working. Let's go ahead and at least put in one game. I know I don't have a hard drive in here, but I can put in at least one game, and we'll just get something displaying on the screen to wrap this thing up. Here we go. Planet X3 playing through the PC speaker. I didn't test that before, so now we know that that works. VGA graphics, of course, looks great. Yeah, we'll go ahead and start the game. And there we go. So we have both drives working. We've got a game that we can play. And this should work no problem. It's nice. Thank you, David Murray, by the way, for creating this game. It actually is a great way to test things because you can drive. There are different executables for CGA, EGA, VGA. I think there's a monochrome one as well. So on a system like this that doesn't have a hard drive, it's just nice to be able to see something like this working, even though I don't have a hard drive in the system. So you probably want to know what I paid for this. Well, given the condition, it was on the lower end of the spectrum. Even for me at eWaste, I paid $10 for this PC. It's maybe not the most desirable PC, and it has a very interesting case. So maybe someone would want to pick this up. Maybe it reminds them of one that they had in their childhood. And I'll be putting this, as I said, on my eBay store as soon as I get finished editing this video. So it should be up there, hopefully, by the time you see this. If not, give it a few days, it'll show up. And I don't like to ship these things necessarily on eBay. I'll have it available for local pickup. But if someone really wants to take a chance, I'll try to ship it to them. But the success rate on these is only about 60–70%. It's going to get there and something's going to be busted. Either the case is going to come back off because that epoxy didn't hold or something. So hate to ship these things, but I'll make it available for someone if they want to buy it. If you want to see more eWaste Wednesday videos, I'll put a link right over here. You can check that out and see all my eWaste Wednesday videos either on this channel or the old ones on my main channel. But until then, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.
End of line.